Admiral James Foggo, thank you very much for joining TvAbraham. I'm so pleased to talk with you again. You're on the board of advisors of the magazine
Indeed.
that I edit,
Yeah.
Jerusalem Strategic Tribune. But I want to go back to your career in the U.S. Navy, including your time as Admiral of the Sixth Fleet and Supreme Naval Commander for NATO and for the EUCOM Theater. And let's start with Europe.
Sure.
And look at Ukraine. And here we are shortly into the early months of the Trump second administration. Let's just ask the big question. How do you see Ukraine? How does this end, do you think?
Right. Well, Bob, first of all, what a pleasure to be here. And thanks to you for your work in the Jerusalem Strategic Tribune, which has fast become one of the go-to publications, not just in this town, but around the world, especially with everything going on in the Middle East right now. Thanks to Ahmed Shirai for founding both the Tribune and also TvAbraham. It's just a pleasure to be here. And you know, one correction, I have to do this for my friend Jim Stavridis. So Jim was the Supreme Allied Commander.
Oh, okay.
My job was as the component commander for the Supreme Allied Commander. So I had the naval component. Ukraine was a partnership for peace nation. We did a lot in the Black Sea, and a lot has changed. A lot has changed. We saw an illegal annexation of their territories. You know, they achieved their independence as a sovereign state in 1991 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And then they were moving in the right direction for reform in their military. They gave up nuclear weapons. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue in 2014, Crimea was occupied by what the media called the Little Green Men. Rarely a shot was fired. But it didn't stop there. And unfortunately, the war broke out in February of 22, and here we are today trying to seek a peaceful solution.
Looking just for a moment at the naval component of this ongoing war, now in its third year.
Right.
One of the signal achievements of the Ukrainians, maybe at sea, surprisingly, they were able to neutralize the Russian Navy through a lot of sea drones. Has this caused the Center for Maritime Strategy, which you're running now, to rethink some naval strategy issues?
You know, absolutely. And it's very important that you bring that question up. And as we'd say in the Navy, well done or bravo Zulu. That's an area that we're paying particular attention to right now. And it has more than just a regional impact in the Black Sea. So American warships were in and out of the Black Sea all the time. I had a presence of either NATO or U.S. forces in the Black Sea of about 240 days a year. So we're always doing exercises, breeze, sea breeze with allies and partners. The Ukrainians had a flagship, Hemet Sagadashny. It was actually built the same shipyard as the Moskva, which is the one they sunk.
They sunk.
Yeah, but with the sinking of the Moskva, I was surprised. I know the Russians were surprised by that.
Yeah, I bet
and you know, the Ukrainians repurposed a couple of Neptune cruise missiles. And looking at the Moskva, I don't think it was prepared for that attack. I think they were perhaps a little arrogant and lost the ship and a lot of sailors on board. That was a flagship for the Black Sea, and it was one of President Putin's favorite ships to do ceremonies, to ride on, or do a naval review. And then it got progressively more aggressive. So the Ukrainians, they didn't have a very big navy. I mean, Hemet Sagadashny was one of their largest ships. They lost most of the ships during the annexation in 2014 because Sevastopol was their port, and that's where the predominance of their navy was. So they tried to rebuild. In fact, you know, one of my jobs was to help them do that when I was a Sixth Fleet commander. They turned to unmanned or uncrewed platforms, drones on the sea and in the air, and they've been incredibly effective. You know, they've probably sunk about 1/3 of the Black Sea fleet, pushed the Russians out of Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, and that should cause all navies in the world to take pause, because when you look at what they've done on the cheap with commercial off-the-shelf technology, you wonder if that could happen to our Navy or any other great Navy. Now, if you look at what's going on in the Red Sea,
Yeah.
That is a proving ground and a training ground for something similar. The Houthis, under the Axis of Resistance, are slinging a lot of weapons at U.S. Navy destroyers and aircraft carriers in the Red Sea.
And we saw this most recently in the ongoing war, I guess, with Hamas, whereby when the U.S. deployed 2 aircraft carrier battle groups, right?
Right.
It included these Aegis.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that provided an umbrella over not just the battle groups, but over all of Israel.
Well, absolutely.
Mostly.
So, I mean, since October 7th and that horrendous attack by Hamas, in the Gaza Strip on Israel, we've deployed 5 carrier strike groups. And it shows a couple of things. One, our loyalty to our allies and our partners, and particularly to Israel, one of our most important allies in the Middle East. Second, that we are able to do this. And during those 2 massive strikes by Iran on Israel, the statistics were kind of mind-numbing. About 1% of those missiles, over 300 cruise missiles, drones, and ballistic missiles launched at Israel, only 1% got through, and the number of casualties were kept to a minimum.
During your time commanding the naval forces of the, not just the U.S., but of the Allied ones in the Eastern Med, of course, the main adversary, I guess, would be the Russian base at Tartus. Now it's gone. How does that change, you think, the calculations for the U.S. in the Eastern Med?
Yeah, they had a presence there, they had a base there, and they had a purpose in their own minds, that they were going to expand their influence in the Mediterranean. So when that all just abruptly stopped, the first thing that surprised me is they didn't try to do anything about it. They didn't try to go back in and regain more territory for Assad. They said, hey, look, he's done. Yeah. And it is a huge strategic and tactical blow to both the Russians and the Iranians. The Russians are back in there trying to negotiate with the new regime to get back into those bases, but they've withdrawn their equipment.
Let me turn to another area that you was also part of your jurisdiction there.
Sure.
Africa.
Yeah.
Huge opportunities, right, for us as the U.S.
Right.
And of course, you did a lot of interesting naval training that paid off when it comes to anti-piracy, joint expeditions there. Tell me how you see that relationship developing with the countries of that continent.
Yeah, I think the United States was very involved in Africa from the time I got to 6th Fleet headquarters in 2009, 2010. We were starting to train African nations. Of course, we had a problem with piracy in East Africa.
Yeah.
We had close allies and partners in North Africa, Morocco being, one of the best partners and allies. And unfortunately, it all came to a screeching halt during COVID. And then the war between Ethiopia and Eritrea kind of shut down the liaison element in Addis Ababa. And so I've encouraged my NATO friends to stand it back up, get back down there. I mean, the hub still exists, but it is not the same organization that I knew, and I think we need to reprioritize. And unfortunately, Bob, it's not a priority here in Washington, D.C.
Amazing.
What happens in Africa eventually manifests itself in Europe and here in the United States. So we cannot allow Africa to become a base, as al-Qaeda did for terrorism in Afghanistan. Furthermore, these people are entrepreneurs. They want the same things we do. They want a life, they want an education, they want a family, they want a house, they want job security, and they just want to live a normal life. And I wish that there was a way, with all the priorities that this administration has, that we could focus a little bit more attention on Africa, because I think, by 2050, UN statistics say there will be 2.5 billion people on the continent.
Is there an ongoing interest of the U.S. Navy in the Arctic areas north there, that Greenland would be strategically placed to control?
Well, Greenland, of course, is part of Denmark now, the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark is a NATO ally, and when you look at their contribution to the alliance, they've increased defense spending, but one of the things that people may not know is in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Danes lost more troops per capita than any other nation, including our own.
I remember.
And so they made a big sacrifice, and they're good allies and partners. So we have it's a space station because Space Force has taken it over, but it's a big radar up in Thule, Greenland, that is an early warning radar, and it's a very valuable strategic asset for the United States because it tells you if the ballistic missiles are flying towards North America, and it's always been that way. So, but it's something that governments need to work out between themselves, and I think that we'll probably do that. As far as me, I'm a submariner. I deployed to the North Pole the first time in June of 1985.
Wow,
and,
I did not know that.
I'll show you my picture. It's we surfaced at the North Pole for about 24 hours. Geographic North Pole, went out in our exposure suits. We candy striped the periscope, so it looked like it was Santa Claus's headquarters.
That's
I
funny.
think we had the heaviest chief on board dress up like Santa Claus. We actually cut an igloo and made a little bar, and somebody had smuggled a fifth of bourbon up there, so the captain was gracious enough to let everybody have a shot of bourbon at the North Pole. Off the ship, of course, not on the ship. Yeah, because the U.S. Navy's dry. But at any rate, it's an important area. It was a bastion for the Soviet Union and ballistic missile submarines, and we are up there operating in all sorts of ways. We have an ice camp. U.S. Navy runs an ice camp. The Arctic is, it's not a U.S. lake, it's not a Canadian lake, it's not a Russian lake.
Right.
You know, it apportions to everybody through the UN Convention on Law of the Sea for innocent passage. And the Russians have tried to make the Northern Sea Route. You can either go over the top, you can go through the Northwest Passage near Greenland, or you can go through the Northern Sea Route. And because there is, you know, we call it the Blue Arctic now. It used to be the White Arctic with ice. And the one thing that struck me when I was up there is I saw plastic in the water. So with the Gulf Stream and, you know, irresponsible shipping coming over the top of the pole, they'll throw trash overboard. The U.S. Navy doesn't do that.
Right.
We have strict regulations on that, but that doesn't do any good for the environment. So the things I noted in a hiatus of 16 years where the Russians were back, there was much less ice, and we had an environmental concern. And so it is a very important area. However, again, where are the U.S.'s priorities right now?
Ambassador James Foggo, it's a pleasure working with you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it. Great to be here.
Great.
And good luck to you with TvAbraham.
Thank you.